Hey everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Mike and the Mad Pod. And I just wanted to first apologize for not getting last week's episode out. I was kind of busy last weekend. I went to Long Island with a couple friends, and you'll be happy to know that the unofficial Mad Pod picks also went 0-2 against the spread. The Patriots did win; they won by 4, which didn't cover the spread, and the Eagles somehow smoked the Vikings in a game that was close for about 10 minutes. The Eagles played really well. I'll get into that pick, the Super Bowl matchup, and what I think is going to come next week in a whole different episode. But this week, I really want to talk about something else. I want to talk about the Hall of Fame, Baseball Hall of Fame, and the eligibility of some of these players, and the results we saw from the Hall of Fame this year. So again, before I also get into that, I also have to give a shout out to 2 weeks ago, the winner of my trivia contest, one Mr. Zach Sporn. Zach, congratulations, buddy. Yet another Lafayette College chemistry guy. It's amazing, these guys at Lafayette. We learned science, we learned biochem, we learned chemistry. They also taught us baseball and football. That was a football question, but Zach, congrats, buddy. Doing big things in med school. Great job getting that question right. And just a refresher, that question was obviously the last time a rookie or a first playoff start quarterback won against a quarterback who won 10-plus starts was Tim Tebow in the Tebow Mania game against the Steelers. The game where he threw the first pass of overtime to Demaryius Thomas for the touchdown, sending the Broncos to the AFC divisional playoff. But good job, Zach. And this week, let's see if we can get a third Lafayette Chem guy. It's going to be a baseball question, and that'll be a little later on in the episode. But let's get right into my topic of this week, and that's Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, if you guys noticed this year, we had a pretty big Hall of Fame election. We had 4 guys get in, which is a big class that really isn't seen too much of late. The guys who got in are absolutely deserving. Huge. Vlad Guerrero, Jim Thome, Trevor Hoffman, Chipper Jones. 4 guys who really were generation-type players. I thought all of these guys were stud players. You had Vlad Guerrero hitting 450 home runs in 318. I mean, that doesn't happen anymore. You never see a guy, a Vlad Guerrero, five-tool type player, cannon of an arm in right field, hit for power, hit for contact, hit balls that were in the ground for base hits. A guy who really, was a Montreal Expo and an Angel who played really well. Chipper Jones, who defined the Atlanta Braves for 20 years. Well, another one of these guys you rarely see, a guy who stays with one team his entire career. I think right now in baseball we have Mike Trout, and we have the 2 guys for Houston. You got Jose Altuve and Carlos Correa, guys who could stay with that team for their entire career. But you never really see a guy stay for their entire career with one team anymore, and that's Chipper Jones. Again, a cornerstone of those Braves teams who unfortunately only won one World Series. Again, that was a group that was in the playoffs or the World Series, I think 4 or 5 times in the 90s, and only muster one win. But that was Chipper Jones, a great career. Again, another 5-tool player, a guy who he didn't have wheels, I guess. He wasn't that fast, but switch hitter who owned teams, very clutch player, who could do it all, hit for power, hit for contact, another deserving candidate. And Trevor Hoffman and Thome, obviously, who have 600, saves / home runs a piece there. 2 guys who really great, although they weren't 5-tool players, still great additions to the Hall of Fame. Now, the thing I want to talk about, again, those are no-brainers. The thing I want to talk about was the Veterans Committee. And this is something I alluded to in a past episode, talking about 2 guys who also got in this year. So I guess the class really is six players, not 4. We have the pitcher, Jack Morris, for the again, played for the Tigers, played for the Blue Jays, was instrumental to 2 World Series wins in the Tigers in '84 and then the Blue Jays as well. But the other guy who got in was a guy named Alan Trammell, and anyone who's spoken to me of late about the Hall of Fame knows that I don't like this move. Again, Jack Morris, if you look at his stats, those are Hall of Fame stats. 200-plus wins. Actually, I believe it's 250 wins if I look at the stats here. But again, a guy who won 20 games twice, Hall of Fame seasons through and through, a definite Hall of Famer, and a guy I was shocked who slipped through the cracks before. But then there's Alan Trammell again, and this is where I just get really frustrated when I see players like this get in, because I think Alan Trammell's a guy who is gotten in because the writers and the Veterans Committee doesn't want to allow steroid users in. So what we're starting to see now, we're starting to see guys who are not quite as deserving to get in because people don't want to let the steroid guys in. And I'll show you what I mean here. And again, obviously, I didn't watch Alan Trammell play. He played, I think his last year was when I was born, '95. A guy played shortstop for those Detroit Tigers teams, again, with Jack Morris back in that '84 championship team. But a guy, if you look at the stats, and you break down the stats, you got to ask yourself, are these Hall of Fame numbers? You're looking at a guy who has 2,300 career hits, 185 home runs and a 280 career hitter. This is not a Hall of Famer. He's not. I mean, you can't let that guy into the place where you have, the greatest of all time, and you let guys out like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, and I know those guys did steroids, but that does not make it okay to let guys like Alan Trammell in, because I just don't see how this guy's a Hall of Famer. I don't. And again, I was not a fan of baseball. Again, I wasn't alive during when he played, but I heard he was a great defender, and I heard he was key to those teams, but that does not mean you get in the Hall of Fame. If the Tigers want to honor Alan Trammell, hey, retire his number. But that does not make him a Hall of Famer, because let me tell you something. Bernie Williams was a cornerstone to the Yankee teams. He's not in the Hall of Fame, nor should he be. I love Bernie Williams. He's one of my favorite Yankees of all time, but that does not make him a Hall of Famer. He's not. And neither is Alan Trammell. I can't justify him getting into the Hall of Fame, because if he's in, then I'll list to you 20 other guys who should be in the Hall of Fame. And now we get to my next point about steroids in the Hall of Fame. And again, a point that I really... It's very, very divisive against baseball fans, longtime baseball fans, people who think the steroid users should get in the Hall of Fame, people who think they shouldn't. And actually, I'll tell you, this was my senior speech topic. My senior year of high school, I talked about my argument why steroid users should get in the Hall of Fame. So I'll give a smaller version of that right now. But the first thing for me is I understand it was illegal in the late 90s. Steroids were not allowed in baseball, but they weren't tested for it. Baseball made no effort to ban these guys. They made no effort to test them, and they made no effort to throw them out. And the thing I want to point to is again, this goes really back to 94. 1994, baseball had its first player strike, where we actually didn't have baseball. I can't even fathom that, in this day and age, not having baseball for an entire second half of the year. In that year, you had guys like Tony Gwynn, who had 390 at that point, or 380, I'm not sure what it was. And the Yankees were out to make the playoffs. And again, baseball season just canceled. And it took a lot for baseball to get back. Again, I think fans lost confidence in the game. It wasn't making as much money, because once you have a strike like that, it's hard to recover. I think hockey's still recovering from the strike or the lockout. I can't remember which one it was, but hockey ran something similar. Anyway, fast forward to 1998, and you have two players with in baseball, really exciting events happening. You have Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa going after Roger Maris's longtime home run record of 61 home runs. And for the entire second half of baseball, people were glued to their seats watching these guys. You had Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa. I think Mark McGwire broke it, 62, and then again, Sammy Sosa had over 60, and then McGwire ended up finishing that year with 70 home runs. I mean, that was exciting. That was an exciting time to be a baseball fan. Again, I was 3 years old, so I can't really say, but that brought people to the stadiums. It got the game back to where it is now. It brought money back in the pockets of the owners, to the game, and that's where we are, today. And I think it's not right of baseball to shun these guys now when they reaped the rewards of them in the 90s. Listen, baseball, if you wanted to ban these guys, from the Hall of Fame, get them out of your game, then you should have done something about it in 1998. You cannot now look back and say, oh, we don't support steroids, when you made so much money off of these guys, other players. Again, Roger Clemens, who was a tremendous top 3 pitcher of all time. Barry Bonds, who set the home run record for 762 home runs. You don't think fans went to the games and paid you money to be there? You don't think that? Ridiculous. They should be in the Hall of Fame. And again, the other thing I can't stand is there are guys right now in the Hall of Fame who definitely took steroids. I mean, Pudge Rodriguez is on the Mitchell Report. You can't let him in now and say, all right, I'll let him in, but I'm not going to let Bonds and Clemens in because they were more controversial. Once a steroid guy gets in, that's it. And baseball, you know what else you did? You let Bud Selig in the Hall of Fame, who saw all of this happen. You let a guy who was the commissioner of baseball during the steroid era and allowed all this to occur, and you let him in the Hall of Fame. And Bud Selig did a lot of great things for baseball, but he completely, butchered him. It was a debacle, the steroid situation here. Right, so now you got to let these guys in. You can't damn them, ex post facto by saying, oh, we didn't know they were using steroids. BS. Come on, you got to let them in. You have to, and especially when you let the caliber play like Alan Trammell in. If you're letting Alan Trammell in, you got to put Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens in the Hall of Fame. And I understand, they cheated, quote unquote, but we don't know how many players, Barry Bonds hit home runs off of that were steroid users, or Clemens who faced steroid hitters. And got them out. We don't know. So a lot of records here are out of place because of the way baseball handled this in the 90s and 2000s. They did a terrible job of handling this, and it's not right that the writers can look back and say, oh, we're not going to let them in because they cheated. BS. Do something about it now. Let them in and recognize how great these players were. And the writers aren't interested in this either. How many articles written about, the home run race between Bonds between Sosa and McGuire? I mean, right? So writers, who was the baseball writer calling out these guys for using steroids in the 90s? Speak up, please. You can't now say, no, I don't like them because they were cheaters. You can't do that. Okay. The other argument I think said a lot of the steroid users is the asterisk argument. Personally, I'm not a fan of this at all. You can't put asterisks on guys in the Hall of Fame because then you have a million asterisk opportunities, right? So you have the steroid era. You have Babe Ruth, who never played against an African-American baseball player. There was an entire different league of players. You have the Negro League, who Babe Ruth didn't play. He didn't face the top competition. So you know what? I'm putting this asterisk next to Babe Ruth's 714 home run record. He never faced an African-American. Honus Wagner played in the dead ball area, 400. Where's that asterisk? Right? So when you look back and you look at all the major eras of baseball, every one of them could have an asterisk. I know that Babe Ruth one's kind of an odd one, but think about it. I mean, Babe Ruth hit 714 home runs. Not one time did he face someone in the Negro League. Those were great players. Right? And I can't remember the exact year, but they lowered the mound after Bob Gibson, the great St. Louis Cardinal pitcher. They lowered the mound down because I guess he was too intimidating. I don't know if that's a rumor I heard, but so where's that asterisk? So every record after 1968 should have an asterisk because the mound was lower. If you do that in baseball, you run into the problem of making notes next to every little record that you can find, and that's not how it is. Let these guys in the Hall of Fame, and they should be Hall of Famers. Of course, now, if you let Bonds and Clemens in, then you got to let my guy Gary Sheffield in the Hall of Fame, which, again, listen, if you look at Gary Sheffield's numbers and you take out the fact that, and I love Gary Sheffield, for those of you guys who don't know, I loved him as a Yankee, I think every Yankee fan from the year 2004, 2006 did the Gary Sheffield bat wiggle. But if you look at his stats and what he did, those are Hall of Fame stats. So again, guy had 500 home runs, was a big part of that 97 Marlins team. And a few Hall of Fame seasons. I would say we classify a Hall of Fame season. He had 40 home runs, around 280 to 300, maybe even like 35 plus. And if you were a key player of that team, MVP voting's huge. A guy who was a 9-time All-Star. Let this guy in the Hall of Fame. Let's make me happy. You know what I mean? If you're gonna let Jeff Bagwell in, another guy, did he use steroids? How can you let Gary Sheffield in? You know what I mean? Once the steroid thing removes, obviously, and I think it does. And I think it will. I think steroids. Eventually these guys are going to get in, just like I think eventually Pete Rose is going to get in. I think the penalty for Pete Rose, I don't think he's going to be alive when he's elected to the Hall of Fame. I think he forfeited that right with the whole gambling, situation. I don't think he'll get in once he passes away, and then they'll get in after the fact. But anyway, to wrap up here, I don't know if I kind of rambled, but again, I love the 4 guys who got in. I feel all those guys were generation type players. I don't want to spend too long here going on the different my thoughts on each player. Like Mike Mussina didn't get in, Kurt Schilling didn't get in. I think Schilling's a Hall of Famer. He was kind of a jackass off the field, but Mussina, it's borderline. I don't want to get into all that. Maybe that's a topic for another video. But again, the 4 guys who got in, I thought were tremendous and fantastic baseball players. I love Vlad Guerrero and Jim Thome specifically. Again, guys who really defined a generation for me. Again, I grew up watching these guys, and they were great. The Jack Morris, I like that Hall of Fame election, but I really don't like Alan Trammell because I don't like his stats are not Hall of Fame stats, right? They're Hall of Fame stats, and I think people look at him, or the veterans community look at him with an inflated, sense of pride or whatever because he didn't use steroids. He's not a steroid guy, and I can't stand that. Again, to me, this is random. I don't think Jeff Bagwell's Hall of Fame either. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. Again, he's a guy who knew. Again, he brought the 05 Astros to the World Series, but a guy who didn't hit 500 home runs, and a guy a guy who wasn't. He was a key to that team, but again, that does not mean you're a Hall of Famer. It just comes back to my point. It's the Alan Trammell point, and it's the Bernie Williams point. Just because these guys were crucial to their teams does not make them Hall of Famers. All right, I've been going on long here, so let's get to the trivia question. Right, this is a question that, you might have heard me ask before, off the podcast. I love this question. Right, so currently there are 4 guys in the history of baseball to join the prolific 40-40 club. Right, so that's part 1 of the question. That's a question you can probably get pretty easily with a quick Google search, but this is where it gets more interesting. So 4 guys who are a member of the 40-40 club. There are 2 guys who missed this club by at least 2 home runs and at least 2 stolen bases. So they've had a year where they got like 38 home runs and 40 stolen bases, 39 home runs and 39 stolen bases. So a plus or minus 2 in each category. Who are these 2 players? So if you can answer that one in the comments section below, really appreciate it. Yeah, guys. All right, one more quick thing. I really wanted to get this. This is very, very, very random. I'm calling out you Met fans right here. Met fans, I got a solution for you, and I want to know your thoughts. So please let me know here, right? The Miami Marlins have made it well known that they're looking to ship out all their players. If you look at it, they've gotten rid of from Stanton to Christian Yelich we just saw. Again, they're cleaning house. The one player that remains for the Marlins that's really is making plus money is Starlin Castro. Again, Yankee fan, a guy who really recognized how great Castro was, and I still love him. I wish he was still a Yankee. But Met fans, why don't you make an effort and get Starlin Castro as a New York Met? Now, I know a lot of Met fans are trying to get younger, are not really happy with these big signings. They got Adrian Gonzalez recently, and they got others. They again signing Jay Bruce. These are guys who are a little older, and I think the thing for the Mets right now is they believe they're still in that window, that championship window. You know what I mean? They still believe that they have the opportunity to win. And it's true. I mean, they were 3 years removed from that World Series run against the Royals, so they should by no means start cleaning house. But they've got to start thinking about maybe investing in their future. And while I don't disagree that I kind of like the Bruce signing and the Gonzalez signing, they do need to get younger. How about Starlin Castro? Starlin Castro is a guy not making any money. Or he's making like 10, 15 million. The guy hits 300, and he plays second base. Not a great second baseman, but a guy who hits for power, can hit the ball the opposite way. A guy who would be great, I think, at Citi Field. What do you think, Met fans? You like Starlin Castro as a Met? I think that's a no-brainer to me. And the Marlins who are giving away, they want to give him away. They could probably just buy his contract. It's going to come down to money. The Marlins would give him away, for a bucket of baseballs as long as they pay his contract. So, Met fans, please let me know what you think of that one. I'm really fired up about the idea. I'm not a Met fan per se. I'm not a Met fan, but I do like. We like to see what we can do to see if we can make the Mets a little better. But anyway, guys, what do you guys think of that? So, Starlin Castro is a Met, and those are my Hall of Fame thoughts right there. This video is going a little too long. I'll probably divide this up a little, chop it up. But thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. I will get back to you next week with my Super Bowl predictions. So, if I pick the team to win, expect the opposite team to win because I am 2-8 against the spread right now, which is really in the playoffs not what you want to see. Unless I can make some bold Pro Bowl, it's going to happen in about 3 hours. Really bet it all against the AFC, because they're favorites. Bet the money line against the AFC. Maybe that's the move. Maybe that'll get me to 3-8. But anyway, guys, thanks again so much for tuning in. I will see you next week to talk Super Bowl. Take care. Thank you.